Good afternoon. This is going to be a great meeting. It's my pleasure to formally call the 34th annual meeting of the members of Philanthropy New York to order. As with most nonprofits, there are specific actions that we must take and information we must bring to the attention of our members as required by New York State law and by our own bylaws. In order to meet those requirements, we are going to first provide our board report, which consists primarily of our financial status, and then go to the new board nominations. After that, and taking advantage of our new members gathering here, both Rana and I will make a few remarks. We'll then close the formal meeting and turn the meeting over to our much anticipated speakers. It gives me great pleasure now to introduce Diana Davenport, Secretary of the Board, and Phil Lee, Treasurer of the Board. Diana and Phil will take us through our quorum requirement, the minutes, and board report.
Thank you. Okay. Members may participate in the annual meeting either through proxies or personal attendance. Several members have submitted proxies for a total of 37 proxies, and in attendance, including outside, we have at least 106. We have at least 106 additional member organizations represented. Thus, we have at least 50% of our membership voting, and that exceeds the minimum 10% called for in the bylaws to establish a quorum. Please turn your attention to the minutes of the 33rd annual meeting. They are in your packets. These minutes were distributed to each voting member at a Philanthropy New York member organization with the notice of the annual meeting, which was sent in March. Can I ask if there are any corrections? And may I have a motion to accept the minutes? Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. And I'm going to vote the proxies in favor. The minutes of the 33rd annual meeting are now approved. Each year at our annual meeting, the Board of Directors presents a financial report to the members. All the necessary information for this financial report is found in the auditor's report to the Board of Directors, which is dated February 25th, 2013, and prepared by Condon O'Mara, McGinty, and Donnelly, LLP. It was accepted at the board at its March 2013 meeting, and a copy of the report was sent with the notice of this meeting to each voting member. It's also in your folder. I'm now going to ask our treasurer, Phil Lee, to summarize that report.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Diana. As noted in the audit, Philanthropy New York closed out 2012 on solid footing with $3 million in assets, which is a 33% increase over 2011. Overall, our statement of activity shows a surplus of $747,000, and this is largely a result driven by increased grant revenue from our collaborative programs. Our core activities of the organization generated a surplus of $117,000 after the impact of depreciation and an unrealized gain in our investment portfolio. Our combined operating and board-designated revenues are now at 8 months of operating revenues, which puts us in a really healthy place. I was wondering, does anyone have any questions about Philanthropy New York's financials? No? If anyone has any questions and would like to ask offline or at a different time, I'd be more than happy to do that, so just feel free to contact me. We now like to ask, yes?
Number of members today and a year ago?
They're about the same. There were 285 a year ago, and we're pretty much exactly at the same number, so we've held steady. Sure. We'd now like to ask Melanie Mortimer, Chair of the Committee on Directors, to come up and talk about some board members whose terms are coming to an end. Thank you.
Thank you. Philanthropy New York has a dedicated and energetic board. Each member is committed to ensuring that this organization is a vital and important resource for the philanthropic community in New York. As chair of the Committee on Directors, I am part of the group who has the responsibility of stewarding new candidates onto the board each year and saying thank you to those whose terms have been completed. This committee is comprised of both current and former Philanthropy New York board members. This group is uniquely qualified to determine the leadership needs of this organization, and I'd like to acknowledge and thank the members of this committee. Doug Bauer, Executive Director, the Clark Foundation. Mark Bodden, Vice President and Director of the May and Samuel Rudin Family Foundation. Stephen Foster, President and CEO of the Overbrook Foundation. Penny Fujiko Wilgrod, Executive Director of the Prospect Hill Foundation. Chris Park, President of the New York Life Foundation. Karen Rosa, Vice President and Executive Director of the Altman Foundation. And Emily Tao Jackson, Executive Director and Trustee of the Tao Foundation. Thank you all for your great work this year. This year we part with 4 instrumental board members, our board chair Mark Bodden, and board members Lori Bazaler, Lynn Toman, and Marlon Torres. Mark Bodden has served on the board for a total of 7 years. During his tenure, he chaired the Committee on Members and also sat on multiple committees, including the Public Policy and Strategic Planning Committees. This last year, as chair, Mark was an ex officio and active member of every board committee. The organization will continue to grow strong as a result of his dedication and attention to our members' needs. More on Mark later in this meeting. Thank you, Mark. Sorry, I thought we were going to be having a cameo. We'll do that later. Next is Lori Bazaler, President of the Edward W. Hazen Foundation, who has been a board member for 6 years. She's been a leader in our diversity work, serving as a co-chair of the Increasing and Diversifying Philanthropy Committee. Lori has also participated on the Committee on Directors, the Finance Committee, and the Gulf Coast Task Force. Additionally, she was a leader of the Executive Committee, serving as Vice Chair for 2 years. And she's been a mentor to new grant makers through our Young Leaders Breakfast Club. Lori was inquisitive and proactive. Her voice on the board will be dearly missed. Lori's not here today with us. I'm going to just continue. Additionally, our board thanks Lynn Toman, co-chair of the Leon Lowenstein Foundation, Inc. Lynn served on the board for the past 3 years. Her creativity, interest, and expertise were funneled through our Committee on Members and Sustainability Committee. Her dedication to the philanthropic sector is greatly appreciated. Lynn was also unable to join us today. Next is Marlon Torres, Assistant Vice President and Senior Program Officer with the New York Life Foundation. Marlene, who also could not join us today, is also completing 6 years on the Board of Directors. During her tenure, she spent several years on the Finance Committee. She was also on the original iteration of the Policy Committee, which was called City Connect, some of you may recall. She's continued to contribute to our policy work through her involvement on the Education Working Group. Additionally, Marlene served as a voice of reason and objective analysis on the board. Our thanks to both Marlene and Lynn. Finally, we'd like to acknowledge and remember our dear board member and colleague from the W.T. Grant Foundation, Larry Moreland. Larry passed away on June 10, 2012. Larry was an incredibly committed and diligent board member, serving on the board since 2004. Larry served as a chair of the Audit and Finance Committees, board treasurer, and was involved as a member of our Foundation Administrators Network and Committee on Directors. Larry was a friend, a colleague, and a wonderful contributor to the advancement to the philanthropic sector. He is deeply missed and will continue to be. We have 4 new slots to fill on the board for this next 3-year term, and 1 board member nominated for a second term. All 5 nominees require a vote of the membership to elect them to the board. I will ask that all candidates stand when their name is called, and audience, please hold your applause until we're completed. Phil Lee, Chief Administrative Officer, the Century Foundation, is our returning board member who is now being nominated to his second 3-year term. Our 4 new candidates are Paula Luff, Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility, Hess Corporation, who is being nominated for a first term of 3 years with the board. Peter Madonia, Chief Operating Officer, the Rockefeller Foundation, is being nominated for a first term of 3 years with the board. Susan Olivo, Executive Director, Reader's Digest Partners for Sight Foundation, is being nominated for a first term of 3 years with the board. And finally, Jane O'Connell, President of the Altman Foundation, is being nominated for a first term of 3 years with the board, and she could not be here with us today. Applause is okay now.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, on the recommendation of the Committee on Directors, I move for the election of these individuals. Do I have a second? All those in favor of electing these individuals, please signify by saying aye.
And I'm voting the proxies.
Great. Any opposed? The motion passes. Many thanks and congratulations to our new board members. At this time, I would now like to recognize and thank all of our remaining board members. Will you please stand as your name is called? The audience, again, should hold any applause until all the names have been called. I'm going to eliminate the affiliation. I'm just going to call out the names. Jay Beckner, Rohit Berman, Anissa Costa, Diana Davenport, Stephen Foster, Phil Lee, Lisa Lynn, Jim Nickman, Ken Montiero, Melanie Mortimer, Cynthia Weisblum, Laura Robbins, Elizabeth Sack, Joan Steinberg, Geraldine Watson, and Gay Young. Our thanks to all of you. At the March 2013 board meeting, the officers of the 2013-2014 term were elected. Lisa Lynn will be our new chair. Diana Davenport and Melanie Mortimer will be our 2 vice chairs. Jay Beckner will be our secretary, and Phil Lee will be our treasurer. I now ask Ken Montiero, Assistant Secretary and Associate General Counsel at Ford, and Diana Davenport to come to the stage.
Thank you. Earlier this year, I was asked to work on a committee with Lisa Lynn and Liz Sack to review the Philanthropy New York's bylaws, to update them and bring them into compliance with best practice. These revised bylaws were reviewed by the full board and approved, and they were posted on Philanthropy New York's website with an open comment period of a month, and were also distributed in your packet. And now we need to adopt them as the full membership. So I would like to move to adopt the amended bylaws that were distributed. Do I have a second? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
I'm voting the proxies, by the way.
Thank you. So the ayes have it. So we now have new bylaws. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our president, Rhonda Brown.
Thank you, Ken. It is great to have you all here today, both in the room now and those of you still out in the hallway. We are really delighted to have such an interesting annual meeting, and part of what that means is my opportunity to share highlights of the last year with you is very short. So you're going to get a very short description right now of some of the highlights, and in fact, in a couple of weeks, all of our members are going to be getting our annual report for 2012. I'm going to just pull out a couple of interesting facts right now, and I hope that inspires you to read that annual report when you get it before you go ahead and put it away in the Philanthropy New York file. So Clearly, our governance is strong. Our finances have been strong. Our programs were also incredibly strong last year. And in fact, we had an unprecedented 174 programs that we put on in our office or co-sponsored with colleagues. That is more than we have ever had in any past year. Along with that, we had 7,000 attendees for those programs. That is a 7.5% increase over our attendance in 2011, which was an increase over the prior year. So we're doing really well with programs. There's a huge array of them, and I'm just going to give you a couple of titles to remind you of the incredible diversity in the programming we do. We had a program called Star Power, How to Achieve Impact by Working Effectively with Celebrities, that featured Kevin Bacon. We did have a full house, that would be true. Power to the People, Participatory Budgeting as a New Model. Decision of the Century, How will philanthropy respond to the Supreme Court ruling on health care reform? Social Impact Bonds, the brains behind the buzz. And we did an all-day conference on veterans that Trinity Wall Street hosted for us last December. Obviously, that is a tiny number out of those 174 programs, but it gives you a sense of the array. The report that we send you in a couple of weeks is also going to cover public policy. And I'm just going to, again, pull out two really important highlights from last year. We've been focusing a lot on public policy the last 2 years because it has been clear to us that that's what our members want. So the Education Working Group over this last year put together a project called Education Funders Research Initiative. It's going to be a series of 3 white papers really looking at public school reform in the last dozen years under the Bloomberg administration. And we will then be having sort of public presentations about the findings. The group of funders who have come together to do this project do all kinds of different things in education. And part of what we're doing with the project is that we are demonstrating how people can see the answers very differently and still come together with a nonpartisan framework to provide critical information to a next administration. Clearly, you're going to be hearing about this as the year goes on. One other thing that I want to pull out from last year is that we took our first position on a policy issue, which was simplifying the private excise tax for foundations. While the issue is important, what was really important is that we put together a process which included having members have the opportunity to comment, having the Public Policy Committee review it, and ultimately having our board make a decision. What it means is that we now have the framework for taking positions as we go forward. So I have about 30 seconds left. And in those 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you to switch the lens from what we have done for you this last year and instead think about how you as members engage with us and why you do that. A few weeks ago, we sent a list of 59 different ways that you as a member can engage with our organization. These next few slides are just kind of going through that list to show you what it is. One person at each foundation was asked to look at this list and send it back to us with the ways that that foundation really is participating actively with us. And what people have been telling us, and you can see from the descriptions that we'll be putting up on our website, is by working with us, what you do is strengthen your own role as a grant maker, you strengthen your own institution, and you have the opportunity to actively support and participate in the broader community. So we're going to have a couple of these in the annual report you get in a few weeks. We hope to actually have a snapshot of each and every member on our website over the next few months. It'll be an opportunity for all of you to look and see what your peers are doing and give you ideas about different ways you can encourage your own staff to work with us, and by doing so, further your own mission. So with that, I am going to say thank you. Thank you to the board. Thank you to you, our members. And most significantly, I'm going to be the first one who says thank you to the Philanthropy New York staff, who have been incredible all year round, and I am deeply appreciative. One more quick thanks before I turn this over to our outgoing board chair, Mark Bodden, and that's to the Ford Foundation for its incredible generosity and support in hosting today's meeting. Mark?
Thank you, Rana. Like Rana, I'm going to be brief because I know you would like to hear the panelists, and we're all excited about them being here. So I was fortunate to be chair of the board during a particularly challenging time, but a productive year for Philanthropy New York. I had personally served on the board for 6 years before I became chair, and therefore I've been deeply involved in the organization. I'm glad to have this opportunity to reflect for a few minutes on some of the past accomplishments and how it fits in with the overall history of the organization. Let me start by saying that Philanthropy New York responded with dexterity and spectacular dedication to the challenges imposed by Hurricane Sandy. Even though the Philanthropy New York offices lost electricity for a week, the staff and the members organized a first planning call just 4 days after the storm and continued to hold organization and learning sessions every week for many weeks after that, eventually evolving into programs for funders with specific Sandy-related interests. On a personal level, it inspired my own boss, Bill Rudin of the Rudin Foundation, to contribute $10,000 to Philanthropy New York to help ensure that the work that it was doing was able to continue. Philanthropy New York's dedicated Sandy page has the most amount of information I've seen about all the donation members and philanthropists from around the world have made for Sandy relief, as well as regularly updating funding news and other resources. As that was going on, Philanthropy New York put on a one-day conference in December, drawing attention to the needs of returning Iraq and Afghanistan veterans and the role of philanthropy could play in supporting programs, innovative programs in health, mental health, family services, employment, and more. Councilwoman Christine Quinn addressed that conference, and it was an amazing learning opportunity for everyone who came. Earlier in the year, Philanthropy New York brought us all together for the 2012 annual meeting, which was the first time we put together what was essentially a half-day conference in addition to the business proceedings. It was the first time we did a thematic breakout session, and it was the first time we brought together state, federal, and city representatives to find areas of common approach and work out differences that could stand in the way of progress. It was the first time ever that a U.S. Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, appeared in public dialogue with his state and city counterparts, and it was a fascinating discussion. These three accomplishments are just a tiny sample of the forward-looking, ambitious work of the organization that couldn't have been made possible without the great staff, deeply engaged members, and fully involved board and committee. We have already had a round of applause for the board, but on a personal level, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the staff. Rana sort of alluded to it, but we oftentimes forget that the work that Philanthropy New York does in this city and around these very complex issues are really done and supported by the staff. And it's at events like these that we get the opportunity to recognize the staff. So I think at this point I'd like to ask for a round of applause for the incredible staff that Rana has. Thank you. I'm particularly delighted at this moment to introduce our next board chair, Liesl Lin. Liesl joined the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation as Vice President, Finance, Board Secretary in July 2010. Prior to joining Sloan, she served as Executive VP of the Nathan Cummings Foundation. She is a long-serving board member of Philanthropy New York, has served on or chaired multiple committees. The board felt strongly that she is the right person, not just to keep the organization going, but to continue to build on our capacity and value. I know she will be a very visible and welcoming presence at events throughout the year. Lisa's combination of insight and commitment will serve the membership well, and I'm pleased to hand the gavel over to Lisa Lynn.
Thanks.
No, wait.
You don't get away that easily.
The real question is who recognizes this? Okay. Lisa, over to you, we'll see.
So, Mark, you have very big shoes to fill. So I look forward to all the time that I'm going to be calling you and asking you various things, as I have already. And I've been very fortunate to know and work with you, and we thank you for all the work you've done for Philanthropy New York and for being such a good friend and colleague to me and to Philanthropy New York.
Great, thank you.
I add my thanks to Liesl, and we also have a small token to give to Mark. And it's so interesting, none of you recognize this box. This would be wine. And everybody who's been a board chair knows a good bottle of wine helps make the job a little easier.
It does.
So we have some wine and a decanter for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We are now about ready to start. Do you want to?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
We will take this back here.
Okay. Is there any further business to come before the, thank you, by the way, and any further business to come before this meeting? Hearing none, I declare the official portion of the 34th Annual Meeting of Philanthropy New York adjourned. Without further ado, we will now begin the main event.